So there's a saying that essentially is when someone tells you who they are, believe them. And this certainly applies to China. Now, have you heard of the 5 Noes or the 7 Noes? Well, I'm going to tell you about these internal policies that were created by the Chinese Communist Party for party members and China writ large. These 5 and 7 Noes are things that the CCP cannot and will not accept. Basically, no to these things. So the 5 Noes are an earlier set of directives issued by the Chinese Communist Party, which laid the foundation for the later 7 Noes. These directives were part of a broader effort to reinforce party ideology and maintain strict control over political and ideological discourse in China. So I'm going to start off with these 5 Noes. And the 5 Noes include no multi-party democracy. This rule opposes the establishment or endorsement of a multi-party system, upholding the CCP's monopoly on power. Next, there is no diversifying the guiding ideologies of the CCP. This ensures that the party adheres strictly to Marxism-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought, without incorporating any other ideological influences such as Adam Smith. There is no separating powers. This rejects the separation of a legislative, executive, and judicial branch, which is a hallmark of liberal democratic governance structures. But for China, the CCP controls everything, all 3 branches. There is no federalism. This opposes the idea of a federal system that might allow regions within China to have any significant autonomy. The central authority is the CCP. There is no states' rights, so to speak. And then finally, in the 5 Noes, there is no privatization of state assets. This is aimed at maintaining state control over key sectors of the economy, resisting neoliberal trends towards privatization. The caveat to this, though, is they will play in the private sectors in order to grow economically, but more importantly, to steal technologies that they can use to enhance their military capabilities. However, the CCP heavily regulates the private sector space within China, even for external players that come to their country. Now, from those 5 Noes grew these 7 Noes, and the 7 Noes of China refer to principles that were once again outlined by the Chinese Communist Party that aimed at regulating behaviors and expressions of its members, particularly in the context of Western democratic ideas and values. The 7 Noes were specifically outlined in a secret internal document officially known as Document Number 9. This document was leaked and reported back in 2013. These principles were emphasized to prevent the spread of Western political ideals and cultural influence within the party and among the public. And here are the 7 Noes, the first being no promoting Western constitutional democracies, including the separation of powers, the multi-party system, and just general Western governmental structures. There is no promoting universal values, referring to ideas like human rights, freedom of speech, and the rule of law, which are often emphasized in Western democracies. There's no promoting a civic-minded society, which is aimed at opposing the idea of a societal realm independent of state control, which could foster community groups and non-governmental organizations that are not overseen by the Chinese Communist Party. In the past, this has even included such minor groups as book clubs. There's no promoting neoliberalism. They reject laissez-faire economic principles that are associated with reduced government intervention in the economy. There's no promoting the West's idea of journalism. They reject the model of a free press that operates independently of state control. They want to control the narrative. There's no promoting historical nihilism, which means criticizing the party's interpretation of historical events is essentially prohibited, even when it's an overt lie. And then there's no questioning of CCP reforms. And these principles are a part of a broader ideological tightening and an attempt to consolidate the CCP's control over the discourse and prevent challenges to its rule through intellectual or cultural means, both internally and externally. However, adhering to the Chinese Communist Party's Noes in these, whether it's the 5 Noes or the 7 Noes, can lead to a range of geopolitical and economic problems, though, both within China and in its interactions with other countries around the world. Here are some key issues that might arise. They become internationally isolated. By rejecting Western democratic norms and the concept of civil society, China might find itself increasingly isolated from Western alliances and partnerships. This can limit diplomatic and economic cooperation, as well as result in increased tensions and misunderstandings. We see this happening in real time with the decoupling or the de-risking of many Western nations from China. This also has an impact on their soft power. The firm stance against Western values can affect China's global image and diminish its soft power. Now, soft power refers to the ability of a country to persuade or attract others to do what it wants without force or coercion. The promotion of a strictly controlled narrative and heavy censorship of alternative viewpoints leads to criticism from international human rights organizations and other governments. This is why lately China's influence is basically a cudgel attempt to beat its wishes over the head of its neighbors in the South China Sea, which obviously causes strained relations. And these no's inherently position China in opposition to the ideological and political structures of Western democracies. This can strain relations with countries that see the values that China is flat out saying no to as fundamental. This potentially leads to conflicts and confrontations, particularly in international forums like the UN. From an economic perspective, there are problems China has as well. The economic principles among the no's, such as opposition to neoliberalism and privatization, is now deterring foreign investment. Investors seek stability, they seek predictability, and open market conditions that align with global financial norms. China is rejecting that with these no's. These no's also limit the influence of external ideas, and maintaining a strict ideological control over what is said, what is believed, can stifle innovation and creativity. The prohibition against certain Western economic principles and the lack of media freedom may limit the flow of ideas necessary for a dynamic economy that grows, and also flat out technological advancement. Instead, they choose to steal their ideas from more open and innovative society, which puts them at a disadvantage in the cutting-edge markets. By adhering rigidly to state control over key sectors and rejecting reforms that include privatization, China may face challenges in adapting its economy to global changes and crises. They experienced this with COVID. They have an overdependence on state-owned enterprises as well, and the lack of entrepreneurial freedom can lead to inefficiencies and economic stagnation. Their state-owned real estate enterprises are now potentially a ticking time bomb of economic collapse, and they cannot diversify. So the 5 no's and the 7 no's reflect an approach that prioritizes ideological purity and control over open engagement and adaptation to global trends. While they serve to consolidate the Chinese Communist Party's power internally, these principles can create significant external challenges and limit China's ability to engage freely and effectively on the global stage, which will cause economic and geopolitical stagnation. And we're seeing that play out in real time.